that might be where it leads us. Now, how would we defend ourselves? Again, I mean, we're a heavily armed nation. We're a bunch of people. We're a lot of people that would be difficult to invade. Terrorism is still going to be an option. Now, who might be afraid of terrorism? Well, certainly other countries, but also we're talking about having counter-revolutionaries. Now, this is getting into parts we're going to talk about in part 3. But it doesn't mean that just because we've got this wonderful society we think is so great that no one's going to want to take anything from it, that no one's going to be pissed off, and that no one's going to want to take back what we are in fact taking from them in terms of property and all sorts of stuff like that, okay? So we're going to keep that stuff in mind, and eventually we are going to have to come up with ways that we do mitigate against a lot of these things. We do manage that kind of conflict. We're going to move on in just a second, so I'm going to take one more.
I just want to address another dynamic that's a bit more positive, I think, maybe. And it's something for me that's a bit hopeful, but it's not actually 100% guaranteed. But that's the fact that historically, the majority of the world, I believe, when provided with a good example, attempts to achieve something along those lines. And historically, well, as far as I can see back, the U.S. has been the major impediment to that after it achieved its own.
Right, but not because we're bad people, and because we've, first of all, let's take the U.S. out of the picture, and there will be lots of other countries that would have been chomping at the bit to do what we've been doing, starting with England, right?
And that provides definite incentive to not have that conflict, but it's not absolute.
All right, we're done. We're going to move on and talk about cops. I would be the first to be thrilled to keep this discussion going, but there's a lot of other ideas. And here's somewhere I have a few more answers that we can actually look at as answers instead of me just trying to make you all be like, too hard. All right. Now, I'm going to make a statement about the policing function that I envision for a future society, for the type of political system that we're trying to develop, and let's see if I can drop some jaws. The political function of the future has to have a whole new meaning. The role of the police officer has to be one of the most admired and revered positions in society. Now, I'm going to give you some background about myself. I've been beaten by police, I've been falsely arrested, and now as a medic I get to clean up after the violence that they carry out in the streets. Now, why on earth would I want to say that someone in that role should actually be the most, revered and appreciated aspect of a society?
Because you don't mean in that role. I don't think
because I don't want them in that role.
If they did what they really said they do, like serve and protect, then that would be totally different.
Because we want them in that role.
Because they're serving protection to the people with them.
Right, and because they want, so we're going to redefine the role. But not only do I want to redefine their role, but I want to make it so freaking hard to be a cop, to become a police officer, and to stay one, that in order for anyone to even consider doing it, it would have to be, you'd either have to pay them so much that they'd be rich, which we can't do, because that screws up all of our value systems, and it messes up anything resembling equity when we're talking about economics, or we'd have to just have it be the kind of thing where you want to do it because it's respected and it's appreciated. So much so that you'd be willing to leap over a bunch of the following hurdles. First of all, you'd have to run for election. The community that you police would have to choose you. Now, maybe we need a lot of police officers at first. We need 80, and we certainly aren't going to, it would be pretty sick of, evaluating candidate after candidate after candidate personally through direct democracy. So maybe we elect a board of people to do this, or maybe we do it directly on depending on the scale. But you have to prove yourself. You have to prove yourself to some representative of, or directly to the people themselves. Okay, if you're gonna have authority over me at any time in the near future, I'm gonna have approved that you're gonna have that role. Now, there's a big change, but not quite enough as far as I'm concerned, because I really don't like cops, and I really don't want us to have to rely on them for almost anything at all. So, next we switch the burden of proof in the case of police officers. If you are suspected of having screwed up, an investigation is automatic. If the investigation produces a preponderance of evidence, just a certain but not too huge amount of evidence is required, I'm sorry, but you're done. You have to be removed. That means that we also have to, again, we're kind of reconceiving what it is to be a police officer. Now, these folks have gone through a lot of trouble to become one. It's very difficult to stay one. And when you let go, it doesn't mean that you were guilty. It means that in our society, we've decided that in order to make it very, very difficult and very, very inconvenient for someone to be an asshole twice, we've decided that if we think you might have been one once, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to go.
What's grounds for the investigation?
Well,
That could just be a personal grudge somebody accuses in their app.
well, we do want to make sure that the victim isn't. We don't want to say that anybody, well, if someone is accused of a crime, arrested by this police officer, possibly abused by this police officer, can that person say, which might come up in every case, redirect the focus to the police officer? Well, we need some way to avoid that so that there's no incentive for someone who's arrested to, turn the finger on their direct accuser, the cop who arrested them for the crime. But we need a system of investigation so that we can decide what's a legitimate complaint, and certainly any repeat of complaints, any series of complaints, would trigger an automatic investigation, things like that. But making it much more much different from how it's done now, and having citizens review boards and that sort of thing being the people doing it, not other police officers who might have some reason to say, well, I'll scratch your back, you'll scratch mine, and we all turn the other way, like is what happens now. So we're switching the burden of proof. The police officer is going to have to be. It's going to have to be pretty obvious that the cop didn't do anything wrong in order for them to stay on the force. If they get kicked off, it's not the end of the world, because we're not saying you're the worst person in the world. You might still be. Now, if you've committed a crime and that's why you're being kicked off, well, you might have to stand trial for that through a system that we'll talk about, in a bit. But it might just be that you're let go and you can't be a cop anymore ever again, but you can go and do whatever the hell else you want. We're just not going to let you carry a gun around or whatever.
Right. Part of this involves job rotation as well. So if that person is...
Yes, it would. Okay, now now you guys can start filling in what you think I'm going to say next, or what you would like to add to some of these role restrictions. One of them would be job rotation. Two types of job rotation is an idea that I have. One is internally, when you're a cop. While you're a cop, 50% of the time, and again, I'm just throwing out a number, half the time you're in a non-authoritarian community service role. You're out there working in the community at a balanced job complex, right? Because, hey, we love those. You're out. You're doing parks and recreation. You're doing counseling. You're doing all sorts of things that you're trained to do and that you have a special skill with. And that's going to be a job requirement for you to even become a cop. Well, do you have social service skills? Can you communicate well with people? You're out there interacting with the community without any ability to arrest anybody or anything like that for half the time or whatever. And then half the time you're a cop. The other part of the job rotation is that we have term limits. Maybe you can only be